Today we're going to be talking about enhancing your identity management project through some solutions that we have within our cadre of the file management system. My name is Richard Cabanas. I'm a senior sales engineer with Attachmate and Novell North America, and we'll be speaking for the next 40 minutes or so about this solution. So why would you want to implement identity management in the first place? If we were going to take a definition from Gartner and boil it down, basically the reason why you want to implement this is because if you have access management, then you can get compliance to get into line, you can reduce costs, and you can reduce human error within your organization. It provides you the ability to have a more secure discipline when creating users. It helps prevent audit failures by regulating all the access that you want people to have. And it also controls the life cycle of your users. So when you're going about an identity management project, quite often you could be using solutions like Novell's, NetIQ's identity management. You could be using Microsoft's solution for identity. Perhaps you're using Oracle's or maybe even IBM's. Although both Novell and NetIQ have tools that can help you significantly with doing an identity management project. Now the question is, if you're doing a project with NetIQ alone or with an Oracle or Microsoft solution, is your identity management project complete? Have you completed the last mile? Normally when you install an identity management solution, what you can expect to get out of this is the ability to create users, have an identity vault where the users are stored. You would have what's called triggered user actions, either through an HR database, through access in the directory system, or through some other what we call authoritative source that allows you to create a user or modify a user, and through that they get a flow of access to multiple systems. Their passwords can be synchronized, they can have workflow brought into this, but still then your identity solution isn't complete. And why it's not complete? It's because you're not doing the last mile, which is managing the file component of this solution. So tools that are implemented, you get a select set of applications that are provisioned, passwords are synced, but the effort to get there could have been a lot of work. Now you do all that work and then you leave one thing undone, which is the files themselves. We're managing to do cleanup of replication, synchronization of files. It was a lot of work, but this project is usually a project that should be a year to 2 years, and it's known to happen that way. So when you want to look for a payback period, from a user's perspective, they don't see a lot of the payback themselves. Yes, they get access to the resources quicker, and that's something they would expect. Their passwords are cleared. They get access to their applications, but where does it help them on the bottom line? So key applications are provisioned and automated, but there's still a lot of things to worry about from the data perspective, especially if your data has been in hand for quite a while. So what about the data? Is there a solution in most identity solutions that can handle the data that's part of this project? And the answer is no. Frankly speaking, I don't know of a single identity solution which, standing on its own, does much with the data itself. So managing your file storage and the repositories, access to these files and the archive of data is something that you need to do to complete the project. You've built the house, but if you put the roof on it. So unless you consider extending your identity management project to protect your file system, the project's not complete. You need to consider how to control access to the files, ensure you're compliant, and reduce costs associated to your file management. That's where the last mile meets with the users. So you want to manage and enforce access to files. You want to have automation and consistent application of an organizational policies. That's a hard word for this guy in Montreal. Basically, if you don't have policies controlling access to data, you leave lots of risk open for failure of compliance, for leaked data, for people getting access to things that they shouldn't have access to. And you want to have role-based access. What if I have a user such as David Gallo, who's currently in Philadelphia, and he decides he's going to take a promotion and move to New York? Typically, in an organization, even if you have an identity management solution in there, if you don't have a complete solution that manages the file access as well, then the issue you have is David will move, his policy rights will move with him. He'll have access to his applications, his passwords will be in sync, but his data won't follow him for where he is. So you want to have role-based access. If the person changes a role, if they change a destination, then you'd like to see their data follow them as well. And quota management and enforcement. Now, you'd think that in 2014, almost 2015, the idea of managing quota it should be a no-brainer. But frankly, it's not for a few reasons. First of all, a lot of people forget to put in quota restrictions, and then you have hard drives that go out of control as far as the store. And we used to say that data store is inexpensive, but a lot of people that are starting to look towards solid-state drives and whatnot, we can't say that it's no longer inexpensive, or it's no longer expensive rather. It has a cost to bear. The other thing is you've got a limited amount of administration staff, and if you have quotas set out there and they're not managed quotas through some sort of policy management, then those administrators are burdened with the ability of having to add extra quota for people that run out of space. What if you have a solution in there that gives the quota management to a department head or to some level technical person? By doing so, you take the burden off the administration staff, and you have somebody control the quota and also provide perhaps a little bit of governance into who should have access and who should not. So if you have access management and compliance, and we want to take a closer look at how we're going to reduce these costs, let's look at the identity management lifecycle itself. If we create a user, well, we've created the user and there's no access to data at this point. All we've done is we've created the user, and that's what happened. Now, that's if you've used a life cycle, you can have access to other applications and so on, but not the data itself. If you do identity-driven storage management, however, and we create that user, well, first of all, you're going to have policies that are put in place. These policies are going to be in alignment with the identity management policies. And again, a couple of things to mention here. You don't have to use the NetIQ solution to provide all of the identity policies for access to applications and whatnot. However, it is one of the best solutions out there. But you can use Microsoft's solution, you can use Oracle, you can use IBM, or fill in the blank. From the storage management side, however, we don't even require to have an identity solution there. We have our own identity-based policies that are built into the storage management. The good news is it works in conjunction with an external identity solution. The great news is, even without that, we can provide provisioning of storage automatically to users. When you have the two together, however, you have an excellent solution that complements itself. So if we take a look at this diagram for a moment, I create a user, and I create that user through any one of my authoritative sources. That user gets added into the directory itself. And then the NSM policies that are put in place are quote unquote listening or waiting for an event to drive forward storage provisioning. And then that user's access is created based on their location, based on what role they have. And we can even provide things such as managing their file rights so they're all consistent and nobody has more rights than they should. We can start putting in management of their policies, their quotas. We can do things such as move that user when they get moved via the identity vault into another user. And of course, we can manage renames. So if somebody's name gets changed, we can also change all their folder accesses to match that. And we can give you reports through this solution so you can see exactly what's going on with your policy-based management and see if there's any improvements you need to make. Another neat part that we do when we add this piece to the identity solution is the ideal of file grooming. There's a bunch of files that people might have on their network which shouldn't belong there. There's another solution that Novell provides called Novell File Reporter that can help you identify those files. Now, what kind of files am I talking about? Well, first of all, temporary files are created all the time. Are they something that you need to keep in a user's home directory or in a departmental directory or any volume for that matter? They should be deleted automatically. The ability to identify and groom off files that are MP3 or MP4 players. If my friend Oscar has his golf videos out there on the network, should we allow them to stay on, or should we groom them off to a secondary, tertiary storage, or delete them altogether? And then we have such a thing called an inactive user policy, where when a user is either deleted or their identity is retired, we're able to take their information, put it temporarily into a vault, have their administrator clean out what files are required, and then after a given period of days that's set by your identity staff, that information gets archived off to some sort of backup storage, and then the users are given more space. And you can also have what's called a deferred delete or a delete immediate. So if the user is deleted and there's a security risk, a policy can be run against them that their information gets deleted automatically, or it can be deleted, as I said, after a period of 30 or 60 days or whatnot. So what we're talking about here is where identity and data meet. So in the identity system, we've got usually the heart of the vault is either Microsoft Active Directory or it's Novell directory, or in some cases it's both, right? So at the heart of any identity solution, you're going to have at least one of these two directories, or in some cases, I say both of them. This is where we choose to provision users, we provision their roles, we assign departmental access, and we can also do deep provisioning. When you put in the identity-driven file management piece, we listen for those changes, we feed them through the policy engine, and then we can create and or manage files, quotas, access to folders, and also provide things such as template files if necessary for people to do their job. And as you can see on the far right here, the solution is completely agnostic. We can create those on Windows Server 2008 and greater. We can have them the control on NAS devices. We can certainly work with storage area networks. And of course, we're going to support our own platforms, Novell NetWare and Novell OES. So some people want to implement identity management simply because they want to automate the access controls rather than relying on the administrator to remember to grant the right level of access to someone, or more importantly, to revoke the access to sensitive data from someone. And these are all things that are key with this kind of deployment. So access management is going to make sure that the right people have access to the right resources and not more resources than they require. It'll create the personal home directories, it'll create the department access, and it could automatically provision access to shared groups or departmental data based on roles. And by the way, you can choose to revoke that if they have a role change, or augment it and just add additional rights to them. And of course, relocate the data based on where it's stored. Let me walk you through an example, and then shortly we'll go through a demonstration here. So let's look at Jane Doe. Let's pay attention to Jane because she's pretty much what you consider a fast mover and shaker. We hire Jane Doe. She's going to start in the finance department. She's located in New York with that very ubiquitous phone number. And she gets her email assigned. All this is done through some identity-based solution, right? We have her using the Novell storage management policy. And what we do here is we extend their access using any one of these authoritative sources. And when she's created, we automatically create her home directory. We give her access to the finance department data. And we might even include template files that'll help her start her role, such as HR files, expense forms, and so on. So I said she's a mover and shaker, and in 3-4 clicks, she's already going to have a new role here. So let's extend the access and change the role. Now she's going to move to the London department in HR as well. So when she has that role change, what happens here is we automatically pick up her home directory and move it from the New York server into the London server. We revoke access to the finance department data, and we grant access only to the HR department data. So what have we done here? We've physically done the move through this process, this policy, so we haven't had to have human intervention. We've revoked the rights from finance, making sure that auditing and compliance will be in alignment because we're not leaving a trace of rights there. And we gave her rights to the new HR department data. And by the way, to whatever employee kit she would require to get her job done in the new location as well. So as far as compliance goes, it would satisfy audits because you create the policy, you ensure that it manages the audits that you need to pass in your organization. And we can have this aligned to Sarbanes-Oxley, to PIPEDA, to whatever type of auditing hoops that you have to go through. We can make sure that it's compliant through these tools. So we're automatically providing those shares, making the compliance easy to spot. By the way, we keep records of this, so you can also show the records of how this is done. We remove access for people that don't require the access, and we can report and document on these access controls. I'm going to take a moment here. I see that somebody has a question, so I'm just going to take a look and see what that question might be. I can find the question on here. I'm trying to find where the question bar went to. Somebody had their hand up, but I can't see the question bar anymore. That's kind of strange. Could you put the question through on the chat, please? Okay, well, I'm going to have to try to get to that question a little later. I can't see the question bar anymore on my GoToMeeting. I'm not sure if it's because of my browser, but it seems to have moved away. All right, so I'll continue along here. Oh, for some reason we skipped through this here. Oh, here's my questions. Okay, they moved on to my other bar. Okay, I'm not... well, that wasn't a question. It was just a confirmation. Okay. So we're provisioning and enforcing the user access here. We're able to grant access only to finance, monitor the file system for unauthorized access, and report on data access controls, as I mentioned earlier. So first of all, it's going to help you reduce costs because you've just go through this once or twice. You test it and make sure things are working properly, and then you implement the policy. And by the way, one of the things we do with this in this tool, which I'll point out to you in a few slides here, or in a few demo slides, is we provide the ability for you to actually do what's called a test run. So you can try your policies out, even if you're on a development system or POC type system. You can try them out and we'll show you the results before you enforce them. So it's just kind of like a practice run, which is kind of cool. So clearly there's money savings there. There's also the automation, which allows you to reduce errors. Quotas are all easily mitigated. And we're able to reclaim the storage by removing those storage from users who are no longer part of your network. So it's pretty powerful for controlling the moves, the adds, the changes, the role shifts, and things such as renaming of employees as well. So a couple of examples here. If you look at this example here, before deploying Storage Manager at Arvest Bank with 230 regional branches, 5,000 users, they were saying it takes them up to 5 days to set up a storage for a new employee. And I think this is pretty typical of what we see in most organizations, that it takes roughly a week. In some companies, it might take even longer. Now they're saying it takes less than a day, and in actual fact, it takes them less than a couple of hours for this to work once things go through all of the processing in the identity vault. But still, if we assume less than a day, they've still saved 4+ days as far as productivity is concerned. Another example here would be the Texas School District. And by the way, I don't know how many of my people on this presentation, there's quite a few of you, are part of the school district of some sort, but this is a popular solution because of all the quick moves and changes that you have from semester to semester within school, or from term to term, as you US folks would say. So again here, they're saying that the cost, if they put down to an incremental cost of what it takes for creating a new user or for a change, it's $5 for a new user or $2 to make a change to the system to accommodate a user. Now, once they put in Storage Manager, their costs drop radically to below $1. And these are their numbers, not ours. So if you look at what that would mean in case of dynamic environments, you see as the environment changes increase, the amount of cost savings you have also would increase. So this is a nice quote that we like to see from IDC saying that the world should know about this technology because it's something that could be quite powerful for use within your company. So in summary, it's just a quick and easy way to automate your data. Now, that's enough of the slides for the moment. I'm going to set up my demo, so if anybody has questions, I'll take them in the next moment or so. I'm just going to switch over to my demo screen as we go along here. So I'll just give it a minute for questions. I'm also going to put you on mute so I can take a sip of water here. Okay, so I'm not seeing any questions come along. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to explain to you a little bit how this demo is going to work. So let me minimize this. What I'm going to show you here is I've got Active Directory users and computers, and yes, I could show this on OES as well, but for the sake of showing the ubiquity of the solution, I figured I'd go with Active Directory. So Audrey Tobias, who was my microphone tester before, Audrey, I'm going to walk you through as one of my users here. So on the left, you can see I've got an organization called NFMS with all these different locations. I've got Atlanta, I've got London, I've got Munich, I've got what's called a vault, which I'll explain in a few moments what we do with that. And all of these different folders are for the different locations that exist. So for instance, in Atlanta, I've got this user directory called home off of Atlanta users shares. And you can see I've got multiple users that exist. If I look on the right of my screen here, I've got Active Directory users and computers. And here's a list of my existing users. Now, normally, if I have an identity solution, I can create Audrey or somebody else in this network. And once I've created that person, the magic stops there. I've got access to my applications, I've got my passwords in sync, but nothing happens over here on the left as far as user directory access. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to create a new user, and Audrey, I'll use you. So I'm going to go in and create Audrey Tobias, and we'll give her a login name. I'll hit next here, and I'm going to give you a very secure password, Audrey, called Novell, and I'll leave that password so it doesn't change for the moment. Now I'm going to stop for a second right here, and I just want to show you something. I'm about to press enter and create this user. Currently, that user doesn't exist. And currently, obviously, there's no file folder for that user. So I'm going to take a moment, press next here. And when I finish creating that user, the user shows up. Sorry about not capitalizing your name, Audrey. And what we're going to see here in a moment is because that user was created, they're going to show up here as a user within this subdirectory. Sometimes it takes a couple more minutes, but it should show up in a sec. Any questions while I'm going through this? So that should trigger in just a minute here. Sometimes I have to go and tickle it a little bit. Okay, why are you not showing up, Audrey? Shouldn't have to do with the user rights, I don't think. Demos work better when they work. I'll add you to a group and see if that's going to trigger you. Shouldn't have to, but put you down to employees. So she should show up here in a moment. I did create in the right directory here, right? We are in. Oh, I'm such a silly guy. I put you in London. So you'd show up in London here. Of course, it's not going to work. I'm not looking in the right spot. So sorry about that. I created her in London, and instead of creating her within Atlanta. So it still works the same way. So I was highlighted on the London one. I thought I was on Atlanta. We created Audrey, and here she goes. She shows up with her subdirectory in here. Now I'm going to create another user just because what I wanted to show is how that user shows up, and we kind of missed that. So Chris, you're going to be my new victim. I'll put Chris. Oh, well, I'm going to do the same mistake if I don't move out of here. So let's close London so I stop getting confused. And I'll go to employees in Atlanta, and I'll create Chris Ritchie here. Need new glasses. So watch what's going to happen. I'll create that user as we did before, and we'll change the password. And what you'll see is Chris Ritchie will show up on the left side of my screen within a second here. So that shouldn't take too long. He'll be here. Any questions while we're waiting for that to roll through? And there we go. So Chris showed up on this side here. I got a question. Shouldn't we be looking? Yeah, thank you, David. I figured that out, but yes, I should have been looking in London. So in this case here, I created him in Atlanta. He showed up here, and now watch what happens. If I open him up, notice I have an approved audio files subdirectory, an approved video files subdirectory, an Atlanta employee kit, and I even have a welcome to the Atlanta office document. Now, normally you wouldn't get this without a provisioning solution for the storage side. And here we have all of this information that comes just by creating that user in the Atlanta roles. Now, I'm going to talk about these two in a second, but what I want to do is open up Atlanta Employee Kit and show you I've got company policies, expense forms, HR forms, everything that Chris Ritchie needed to start doing his job. So just wanted to point that out. I also want to point out the approved audio and video files are where Chris would be allowed to store videos or audio files that are part of what we consider doing the job. If he had other files that showed up, MP3 or MP4 files that were illegal, that were somewhere else in his subdirectories, we can groom those off. Now, Chris, just like we did with Jane Doe, I'm going to take you and move you to a new location. So now what I'll do is I'm just going to open up the London users here and click on the home. And we see there's no Chris here for the moment. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take Chris's user ID. I'm going to move him over to London. So I'm going to switch you over to the London users here. So I'll just drag you over to employees. It's going to give me my little warning. We're going to say fine. Now what you're going to see happen is in a couple of moments, we should see his user ID come over to London on this side. So he was moved over to the London, and there we go. So what had happened, I did a physical move as a user or as an administrator and moved him from Atlanta over to the London subdirect or London Active Directory container, and his user ID was moved. And now if we open him, you see I've still got the Atlanta employee kit. We're giving him time to groom off the files he requires, but I now have the London employee kit that sells welcome to London, gives him his information and the policies required to work within the London office. So once again, Chris benefits automatically from getting access to his information through storage management. Now, Chris, you've been a good employee, but you're a little too ambitious. So what's going to happen now is we're going to take your user. So we'll go to here and we can see Chris is there for the moment. And Chris, unfortunately, you've been a little too ambitious. So we're going to go over to your London container and we're going to retire you. Sorry about that, bud. So I'm going to delete Chris's ID. And what we're going to see happen here in a moment is we'll see that Chris is going to disappear out of the London container. So what we've done, just to recap here, is we've gone in, we used a Novell Storage Management to trigger an event, to listen to an event triggered by the Identity Vault, have that user created, their storage created automatically, their templates created automatically, their welcome folders, all they needed to get started with the job. We then took Chris's ID, we moved him to London, and we saw that he was given access to his London shares and his new London kit. We just deleted Chris from this side, and as you see on this on the user's container here, Chris is no longer there, his folders. So we've automatically done something with them. What did we do with them? Well, I mentioned I talked about this folder called Vault eventually. This is what happened with Chris. We went into the Vault here, and we went into the user subdirectory, and in there, out of London, we have Chris with all his files that were moved over to a Vault. Now, we could have done a bunch of other things here. We could have just deleted them automatically. We could have had them repositioned to his management or one of his managers. But in fact, what we chose to do is we put them in a vault called Vaulted Users, which would be on a tertiary storage. It gives the manager a chance to look at what files Chris has that are still pertinent to the work effort. And once that manager either gives an okay or over a pre-time period of 30 days or 60 days, whatever you define, that user's information would automatically be backed up and put onto a storage tape somewhere. So all this is through Storage Manager. So let's take a look at how we've done that. So I'm going to open up my Storage Manager console here. And I'm just going to shrink these down for the moment. I should put in the right password. That'll help. And this is the Novell Storage Manager Administration Console. As you can see, there's a separate one for both eDirectory. Oh, sorry, just want to get rid of that. There's a separate one for both eDirectory and Active Directory. You need to administrate them each with their own storage manager. On the main console, we see the status, if everything's working properly and whatnot. We've got management actions we can do, which I'll talk to you about in a moment. But first, I wanted to show you how we made all that magic happen. We did that through something called policy management. So the first one I'd like to show you is when we created Chris and we created Audrey. We'll look at Chris first. In the Atlanta users home, he was part of a policy that was driven that did a few things, such as associate, first of all, the policy is associated to a specific container within Active Directory. So the minute we create an employee in this OU, the policy would take place. We can set up some aux policies as well. And in the provisioning options, first thing I wanted to show you here, I define all those rights through this policy. So there's no room for human error here. Again, audit and compliance. I can define those rights and make sure that everything is consistent for all my users that are within that subdirectory. I have my target paths, and you notice up here I've got this thing called distribution random, or I can go actual free space or percentage. What this allows you to do is if you have more than one volume assigned to a user's directory structure, I can have those users randomly passed across both volumes so that I don't max out one volume more than the other. I've got this concept called quota options. I talked to you earlier that quota is available in most operating systems today. However, it's not managed. When I have a quota set up here, I can enable a quota management so everybody has the same quota of disk space. But you notice I also have this quota management here. This is where I can have somebody, like in this case, this help desk user, manage the quota on an individual basis without disturbing the administrators of the network. So what I can do is I can say I want to increment that quota by a certain amount every time that person requires a little bit more quota. And I'm going to show you at the end of the demo how that looks. But what this allows you to do is say my minimum threshold is 50. I can go to 100, and then after that, I would need administration to get involved. So the target paths, of course, is where I'm creating that user's directory. And if I had to do moves, I can schedule that so the moves are only done after hours. What does this imply? Well, in my demo, I created Chris in Atlanta. I moved the person to London, and within minutes, the subdirectory structure was also moved. In practicality, if you don't want that move to happen during the day because they might have a lot of data, you can define what times that move happens. And then there's this concept called grooming rules. The grooming rules I talked about, where we can go in and say there's certain files that we want to delete, such as music and MP files, temporary files, anything that's not in the approved video files, you can delete and move. Now, how do we control the approved video files? Well, that would be done through something like Novell File Reporter. You could do a consistent check on those folders, and if Chris or Audrey were being naughty and they put MP3 or MP4 files that were not authorized, you can set up grooming rules to get rid of those. So that just basically shows you what that policy is meant to do. And of course, the same one would look on the London policy. So I won't show you that, but I do want to show you the inactive policy here, which shows you what happens if you have inactive users. So there's the template folder they'd be moved to. Again, we have vault rules of where we delete them and what the options, the target paths would be for putting the inactive users. So that's a brief overview from that perspective. There's a lot more we can do with this, of course. In the management actions, for instance, I can do a consistency check to make sure that all of my my user information is working the way it should. So I'm going to go in here. Just waiting for it to show up my paths here. For some reason, it's not. Okay, so go in here, go in and pick an FMS, Atlanta, for instance. Add that. And when I do that, I can do a consistency check. And by the way, I can run this in what we call just a check mode. Consistency check is always automatically in check mode. But when I talked about you can test your policies to make sure they're working properly, what I'm referring to is I could have this check mode. If I set up a policy that's going to move Oscar or Chris or anyone else from one container to another, or create their container and establish rights, with the check mode on, it will do all of the actions, but it won't commit the actions. It'll just show you what the results would be. And as I said, consistency check is always in check mode itself. If I uncheck this and I was running it against a policy for creating users folders, then that action would happen. So I'm going to go ahead and click consistency check here. And that should start in a moment. Oh, well, if I hit run, then it'll start in a moment. And what it does here is it shows us the results of all these managed users paths. So I can go in here and I can see that all of these users have DS paths that match. They've got a status of managed. They've got the management path is the same for every one of them. We can see that the paths exist and that all their rights are consistent. And the reason why this is consistent is because we've used those policies to enforce it. So all of my users look 100% the same. Although you can see here, I've got one user, for instance, that has a little bit more storage than the other users. And that's because of that quota management. Their departmental manager or their help desk must have gone in and defined additional quota for them. So that shows you a little bit about what the consistency check looks like. And again, as I said, we could do a bunch of other different things, such as do reports on this, uh, take a look at the different data migration tasks. Oh, by the way, this is another thing. Speaking of data migration, not that I want you to go there, but if you had to do a move from Novell's OES to Microsoft Windows, you can use this tool to do what's called cross-empire migration and move the users from one system to the other system. You can identify the source tree, the target tree. You can align the users from one directory structure to the other, and you can use this to control and move the folders and rights from one system to the other system and do it in a controlled fashion. Now, there are other tools out there, such as Quest, that can do this type of thing, but what we give you the advantage of here is if you do have to go that route, you have a tool afterwards that can manage your users, as you saw here. So the last thing I wanted to show you before you folks go off to do whatever else you have to do is I just wanted to basically go in and show you the quota manager here. So hopefully I'm going to remember who this user should be and the password. Might be this. I might have to do the password twice. We'll see. So this is what the quota manager looks like. If I go in here and I want to do search criteria, I can search on a bunch of different users, or I can put a star. But in this case here, oh, Chris is already gone. Let's put Audrey, for instance. Oh, she's not part of the managed one, so that won't work. So let me just go in here and put. Oh, uh, I was not. I was looking at fully distinguished. So let me just put a star here. Submit. And these are the different users I have out there. If I click on one of the users, I can go in and see what their quota looks like and how much space they have available. This person has quite a bit of space available still, but if I needed to, I could go through here and I can manage additional quota. Also do a performance analysis. I'll show what that means. Performance analysis is actually pretty cool too. Let's say somebody says they need more storage quota. And you're saying, okay, well, what's that person using it for? I can connect to the performance analysis and say, okay, well, you know what? This person says they need more storage space, but they're using a lot of temporary files. Why don't I delete those files and then say, come back when you require more storage? I could, however, if they did need the storage, just say add the 25 megs, and that person has the additional quota. So they're now up to 75. So just a quick way to go in and manage the person's quota. I can do that with pretty much, so this user here has a lot more space available. They only got 38 megs. Again there, I can analyze and see how that's used. So in the little time we had, I went in and showed you folks a little bit about how we can marry identity management solutions with storage management through identity. And we can see how this is a perfect complement to increase the usability of the identity solution and the profitability. I showed you the creation of a user in one place, Atlanta, that we were able to give them their temporary files, their templates, their HR documents, and so on. I showed that moving them gave them access to their new information and allows you the chance to remove the old information at will. I also showed when that employee is retired or deleted or suspended that we move them to a vault and automatically take care of that so that their access is revoked again, ensuring that you have proper audit and compliance. And in the end, I showed you a little bit how that policy was done and how we manage the quotas. So I'll take any additional questions if you have right now. I don't see anybody coming through with any questions, so I'll just take a moment to again bring your attention to these additional information sites. You can get information about Storage Manager at the location shown in this URL. You've got additional tech talks that you can go to. such as full tech talks that talk about storage management, file reporter, and so on. And of course, our always popular filer series is there as well. And again, if you wanted to, you could get information from our BrainShare site. Now, BrainShare itself is obviously come and gone, but you can still get access to the PDF files of some pretty great presentations out there. This concludes my session. I just want to take a moment to thank everybody for their participation. Appreciate your attendance and hope to see you again on future Tech Talks. Thank you.